r/AskReddit. What's the biggest plot hole you've discovered in a movie? This isn't a movie, but this has been bothering me for a long time now. Nobody at AMC has ever had an IV before. Apparently, in The Walking Dead, when Beth gets taken into the hospital, she takes the IV out of her arm and tries to use it as a weapon against the doctor and Dawn as if it is a sharp and pointy needle. And in Breaking Bad, when Walter sneaks out of the hospital and goes back, there's a clear shot of him sticking the needle back into his vein as if it is a sharp needle. When anybody who has ever had an IV knows that they inject the needle into you and remove the needle, leaving a small tube, which is not a weapon. Nor is it capable of being stuck back into the vein once removed. I've had an IV twice. I did not know that, till the death of Captain Kirk in Star Trek Generations, when in an episode of TNG, Scotty acted as if he believed that Kirk was still alive. IRC, the creators, acknowledged that plot hole, but they were trying to market the movie to wider audiences and not just Star Trek nerds. He had been in a transporter buffer for 80-odd years, perhaps that makes your memory fuzzy. The ship had been missing for 75 years, and by the timeline, he'd have gone missing about a year or less after witnessing Kirk killed aboard the Enterprise B. The butterfly effect, when the main character changes time to convince his cellmate to help him by seemingly sprouting stigmata scars right before his eyes. The only problem is that time travel in the movie works by completely changing the present. So him going back and giving himself scars would either have never convinced his cellmate in the first place. Bro, you always had those scars. How's that supposed to convince me? Or would have changed the course of his life enough that when he got back to the present, he shouldn't have been in jail. The worst part is that there's no reason to put the drama of having his diary stolen in the first place, because it creates a plot problem that can only be solved by the plot hole. The whole movie is one big plot hole. TLDR, Tinkerbell movies contradict each other. My favorite Disney character is Tinkerbell, so when I heard about the Tinkerbell movies coming out, I was excited. I forgave any inconsistency in the first movie, from lore chalk it up to writing a new universe. Here are some things established that are later contradicted for those who haven't seen it. All fairies arrive at the same fairy tree. All talents are present and a ceremony begins to discover specific talent. No fairy seems concerned about how much fairy dust a fairy has / uses. Any fairy can fly through any season, even winter, and not be affected. Fairy dust makes things fly. Only the seasonal fairies ever go to the mainland. When the second movie, The Lost Treasure, came out, among its plot holes within the movie there was one major change. Fairy dust was limited and needed to be carefully measured. In the first movie, Tink wants to leave Pixie Hollow because she didn't like the idea of being a tinker fairy. Terrence, being told she wants to be gone forever, gives her an extra scoop of fairy dust. In the second movie, Tink plans a trip to find the lost treasure and essentially save Pixie Hollow. When she asks Terrence to get her an extra ration of dust, he gets angry and says there is no way to do that. Now maybe there is a sudden shortage, but even after the Blue Moon thing is solved and Tink effectively made it possible to create lots more dust than ever, they still ration out dust. The third movie, The Great Fairy Rescue, all the main characters are on vacation on the main island that Tink was told she couldn't go to except for a special circumstance, while here she interacts with a human girl, laying down how fairies do what they do. In the end, the girl and her father need to get to London in a hurry. Preferred method: flying, of course, but here is the thing. It's raining in London, so this movie establishes that water does not rinse off fairy dust. Cover more on this later. The fourth movie, Secret of the Wings, is one that really irritates me. I loved the idea of Tink having a sister, but they broke all the rules to do it. Rules they themselves set. Tink feels called to winter. However, all of a sudden she isn't allowed. No warm weather fairy can go into winter or their wings will freeze and break. Tink invents winter clothes and goes anyway. If freezing is a problem, why has no one thought of warm clothes before? Also, the story about why no one is allowed to cross the border comes from a long time ago, before Tink came to Pixie Hollow. When she arrived in the first movie, winter fairies were present in the talent ceremony. Tink was also taken on a tour and flew through winter. This was also the point I realized a glaring contradiction. If fairy dust makes things fly, why do fairy wings need to exist? Fairies need dust to fly, but if their wings break, they can't fly no matter how much dust they use. And if they have wings, why can't they fly without dust? To further establish the separation of warm and cold fairies, they introduced the second fairy tree that gets fed from the first, so winter fairies don't go to warmer seasons to get dust, which is not measured in winter despite the feared shortage. I try to keep the holes to the universe as a whole, but Secret of the Wings has one glaring physics problem: frost. They use frost to protect plants from freezing and dying. They describe frost as a warm blanket. They do know that frost is ice, right? The fifth movie, The Pirate Fairy. I don't know WTF they were thinking for this. Now suddenly we can swap talents with a little alchemy. That's probably not the right word. Yes, it's dust, it's magic, but why does it change their clothes? Also near the end, the pirates, covered in fairy dust and flying, fly through a wave of water and instantly fall because all the dust rinsed off. But the reigning London kidnap? There could be an argument of salt water versus fresh, but there are many instances of fairies getting wet without losing the ability to fly. This is a wall of text, but I was really betrayed how they disregarded the previous movies when making the next. Like I said, Tink is my favorite. And they didn't bother with consistency. Also in GFR, Tink is telling stories of the past movies showing they are all linked. I have only seen Never Beast once and don't remember any glaring things, but I'm sure there are. I'm guessing different writers wrote the movies, but it's like they didn't even read scripts of the others when writing. Edit. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for gold and silver. I am happy so many enjoy this. Most roll their eyes when I rant about kids' movies. Ready Player One. When the main character successfully completes the race for the first time, you're telling me that nobody else noticed how he did it until he told others how. I don't think he was even in the back of the starting positions. There were plenty of other people who must have seen it. There's whole companies devoted to this. This race is quite literally one of the most important things in the game. None of them recorded the race to analyze it. I think the intro talks about how most people lost interest in the race. But really, a teenage kid outperforms companies. That's not even the worst plot hole in the franchise. In the book, when Wade travels across country to Ohio, the countryside is so lawless that a Greyhound bus needs armed guards on to avoid being looted by armed gangs. At the end of the book, he finds out his best friend in-game is an overweight girl who lives by herself in an RV. She travels around the country and connects herself to a virtual reality game that cuts off her awareness of her surroundings. Spider-Man 2 with Dr. Octopus. He's just a regular guy with metal arms attached to his back, and he takes multiple punches to the face from a guy that can stop a ducking train with his arms. Spider-Man would have punched right through Doc Ock. It always bothered me. In the comics, when Doc Ock takes over Peter Parker's body, he's surprised to find out he's so strong. He realizes he could have outright killed him in any of their fights, but he was holding back. Beauty and the Beast. No one seemed to remember the people lost in the castle. The live-action fixed this, but then introduced 10 times more plot holes. Like the book that can take you anywhere they use once, and Belle still rides the horse through wolf-infested woods to save her father instead of taking the book. Daniel San should have been disqualified for that face kick in The Karate Kid. Not a plot hole at all. Back then rules were way more lax. There were some specific illegal moves, but kicking the face was in no way illegal. They didn't even require padding, it was actual fighting. I'll give an example. My sensei once used a move that was essentially a cartwheel. He checked a kick with his hand, came over the top with a ridge hand to the face, then swept over the top with a roundhouse to the face, finishing with an axe kick on the ground. When he first used the move, his opponent got KO'd and he immediately won the match. Afterwards they banned the move for being too brutal. But until the move was banned, anything was fair game. Not so much a plot hole as a plot contrivance, but Indiana Jones surviving a nuclear blast at relatively close range by hiding in a refrigerator was hella stupid. Also, we are shown only the fridge being thrown away by the blast. Did no other household appliance get blown away? If not, why was the fridge the only thing that was not incinerated by the nuke, but instead carried away to a safe distance? TBF, this is hardly the dumbest thing Indy's done that turned out to work perfectly. Raiders straps himself to the conning tower of a Nazi sub to travel across the ocean for a few hundred miles. The sub apparently never completely submerges. Temple of Doom survives a plane crash using a rubber life raft as a parachute, with 2 other people. I love these movies, but they are far from realistic. Ant-Man has tons, like how he can ride ants despite putting his whole pressure on them, and how he somehow breathes despite being smaller than oxygen atoms. Or like how you can't make a man's atoms smaller, you can only smoosh them closer together. Pimp particles are basically the Marvel equivalent of the Speed Force. Don't gotta explain shit. Frozen. Spoilers. Elgas Prince Hans tried to kill Elsa and left Anna to freeze to death, thinking he would become the king, doing so because people believed he married Princess Anna. However, he would not become the king marrying her, he would become the prince consort, and maybe the people would call him the king whilst married to Anna as the queen. But if she died, what most believed that happened, he would not be granted the power. It would go to whatever person was controlling the kingdom in those 3 years before Elsa's coronation, while they find another person connected to the family through blood. Hans would, at best, be the ex-queen's hubby living in the castle without any power whatsoever being taken care of, however running the kingdom now, since he would be technically family and that person's burden. Not the worst life, but not what he wanted with his plan. And it's not like he pretended to take over the power through brute force, since his plan clearly was: 1. Marry Elsa, 2. Kill her, 3. Become king. Or B. 1. Marry Anna, 2. Kill Elsa, 3. Anna becomes queen and he the king. Or C. 1. Marry Anna, 2. Kill her, 3. Accuse Elsa, 4. Kill Elsa, 5. Become king. It's kind of stupid, but that really bugs me since most of the movie happened because of said impossible to happen plan. Like and subscribe.